Today I'm going to be sewing up the Richard waist bag. This is a pattern from UhOh Creations, and it's actually the first pattern that I sewed when I bought my machine several years ago. This pattern was so much fun when I first made it. I bought it as soon as I came out and I loved the shape of it. I'm using materials from K&A Custom Fabrics, and my contrast is going to be from J&R Edwards, as well as my lining print is also from J&R Edwards. My zipper tape is from Mormino, and everything is a cotton woven, and I have everything interfaced with a layer of SF101 on my back lining and my lining top. I do have some extra interfacing. I have Decaville Light and fleece kept out of the seam allowance. I chose to put those on the lining pieces, one because on the back piece of the exterior we are putting a zipper, and two, because I didn't want any issues with wrinkling or things like that, since I wanted a little bit of extra interfacing, but definitely they're kept well out of the seam allowance. This pattern is going to be a quick fun sew, so let's go ahead and get started. To get this pattern started, I'm going to do a lot of prep work first. So I'm going to be sewing out of the order that the pattern gives us, just because this is what works best for me. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab the longer piece of zipper tape. I have attached 2 zipper pulls on it. I'm going to grab out my 4 zipper tabs, 2 exterior, 2 lining, and I'm just going to make traditional zipper sandwiches with these. The lining will be right sides up. The zipper tape will be right sides up on top of that, matching up those short edges. The exterior will be right sides down, so everything will be right sides together with that exterior zipper tab. The zipper and the lining are both right sides together with that exterior tab. I put a clip there in place to hold it, but I'm going to take it immediately over to the machine and I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern, and then I will pull the tabs wrong sides together and top stitch. This is how the first side looks. I'll repeat that with the other zipper tabs and the other end of the zipper off camera, and we'll go on to the next step. The next thing I'll do is I'll pull out my 2 front tab pieces. Mine are going to be the same print, but you'll need 1 exterior, 1 lining. I did go ahead and mark the placement for where my magnetic snap will go. I'm not going to install it yet. I'm going to wait until after I get a little bit further in the pattern. So for right now, I just have it marked. I'm going to place these right sides together. I will start sewing at the top, go all the way down, and come back up the other side. I'm not going to turn this just yet though. I'm going to wait until I get the other area where the magnetic snap is going to go, and I'm just going to check it first. If they look like they're going to fit the way I want, then I will add the snap, then turn it, then top stitch it. If you want, you can make tiny snips into the curves or use pinking shears and trim that down, but like I said, I'm not turning this yet, so I'm just going to set it aside until I get the other piece. The other piece where that magnetic snap will go is on my front slip pocket. You have 1 pattern piece to cut out the front slip pocket and that front center piece. The pattern piece has a dashed line where you will fold down to cut out the front slip pocket piece. Just note that the shorter area, the smaller, is the top. The larger, and it does have these little cutouts, that's the bottom. So for the slip pocket piece, I place them right sides together, matching everything up, and then I just sew across the top. I've sewed this piece together. Before I turn this and top stitch, I'm going to lay it here on this pocket piece. That's where it's going to go, the front pocket. And I'm going to take that magnetic snap and I'm just going to kind of push these together to see if I'm going to like that placement. And this is what I was thinking about. Whenever I was making that, I thought, gosh, that looks a little too high up. And you can see it would fit, but this flap should have a little bit more lift. So for me, I'm going to have to lower this down. So I'm okay with having this one here, but I want to make this flap have a little bit more of a lift on it. So I will place it just a shade lower. This is one way you can check your magnetic snap placement before you install it, just to make for sure you like it. So now that I know how I want, I'm going to go ahead and finish this by finger pressing this seam open and folding those two pieces wrong sides together. I'm going to roll out these seams and then I'm going to top stitch across. You can take it to the ironing board if you're not feeling lazy like I am today. Here's how that slip pocket piece looks. I'm going to add the magnetic snap off camera. And then I will also take this exterior front center piece. We have an exterior and a lining. And I will add this slip pocket to this front piece and just baste it in place. I did not add any interfacing besides the SF101 to any of these pieces because there's several pieces here to give it some kind of structure. I also did not add anything to the side pieces that attach on each side because they're not big and we have several seams building up. So I'm going to set this aside. When I come back, I will have my snap attached and I will have it basted into place on this pocket. The next thing I want to do is I want to prep this back pocket piece. We have a pattern piece for this back piece, but we have measurements for this zipper facing, I think is what it's called. And with the zipper facing, you cut it out. I did not interface my zipper facing, but I used the measurements and pattern as to how far down from the top I placed it, and then how far down I drew my lines on the top, the other line, and then in from the side. Once you have those lines drawn, all we do is we sew on those lines the rectangle box to create an opening for our zipper. So let's just go ahead and sew directly on the lines we drew from the pattern measurements on this piece here. My facing is right sides together with my back. Once you have those lines drawn on here, we're going to use scissors. We're going to cut down the middle of this line. So we'll start cutting here in the middle, cut all the way down to the end, and then we'll veer to the top corner and to the bottom corner. It's making an inverted triangle. We will not cut through these stitches, but we'll cut as close as we can to them. Then we're going to push this facing through the opening. Our goal is to not see any of this facing through when we're looking at this back piece once we have it all pressed out. I will definitely have to take this over to the iron. I can't be lazy on that step. If I didn't, it just would not lay right. So the way I get this started is I fold it in half and make one snip. Then I go ahead and open up just to make for sure that I'm cutting it properly and not getting too close to either side. Once you get close to that edge, go ahead and start veering towards the corners. And then repeat that on the other side. The way I start pushing it through is the first thing I do is I open these seams on the back and I just kind of finger press them open. You might not notice a difference, but I feel like this just helps everything to lay a little bit better. So I press everything open and then I push this facing piece through. And I make sure when I'm pushing it through that I start rolling that edge, and then I will use the iron to kind of teach it exactly the way I want it to lay. And I also use a glue stick. Put the glue stick here so that I can press it here so that it'll kind of stay steady. The better opening you get on this box, the better your zipper will look at the end. I will go off camera to get the facing through, iron it and glue it, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. The last thing I'll do before I do those steps off camera is this zipper. You have two zippers in this pattern. The shorter one is going to be for that back pocket. The way I do it is I have one of those zipper pocket pieces laying right sides up. Nothing on this. I did not interface it at all, but you definitely could. And then I lay the zipper tape on top, right sides up, and I sew it with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Once you have that sewn together, what I like to do is I like to flip it back and attach the seam back to the lining piece. This just helps it lay flat and helps me get a better stitch whenever I'm putting it in that box. Here is how the top of the zipper looks. Here's what you'll see whenever you open the pocket. I'm going to repeat those same steps for the other side. So when I come back, I'll show you everything I did off camera. So what I did while I was off camera is I added the other zipper tab to the zipper for the main opening. That's the bigger zipper. I basted this slip pocket onto the front centerpiece. My snap tab, I did add the magnetic snap to both the slip pocket and the snap tab. And I went ahead and turned this right sides out, and I top stitched all around. Now I'm just going to clip that on there just so you can kind of see how it kind of tells you where it wants to go. And you can see mine is hanging off just a little bit. I don't want it to be flat like that, so I'm actually going to make sure I make those edges match, even though I'll have to push it up a little bit and have a little bit of lift. This will allow me to be able to add a few more things into that slip pocket. So if my phone's a little bulky, or if I want to put a wallet in there, I have just a little bit extra room. So I just want that little bit of lift there. So I'm going to base that in place. I'm going to make sure it's centered. Then I'll baste that across that snap tab across the top there. I added the other side of the lining to the zipper. And then I took that facing, the zipper facing, and I ironed it flat, pushed it all through to the inside, and you can see it here. I did glue it down, so it's not like a hard glue. I could easily peel it up if I needed to, but it just kind of stays in place. So I checked to make sure this was centered. I'm going to baste across here, and then I'm going to add that zipper to that back opening. Now that I have this in place, I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to be working on this in just a minute. But first, I'm going to go ahead and pull out that pocket piece. I'm going to make sure I center this back on my lining. And then I'm going to have the zipper teeth to be in the middle of my opening. You can use glue or double-sided tape, pins, whatever you prefer to use. I'm just going to keep it kind of open, so that way while I'm sewing it, if I need to adjust, I can easily. What you're going to do now is you're going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from that box that you just folded back. And you're going to be careful to try to keep the zipper teeth in the middle while going all the way around this box. After we sew around the box, we are going to flip this to the wrong side, pull down your pocket, add a clip on each side to just kind of help it lay flat while we work with it a little bit. I'm going to trim the bottom. And then what I like to do is I like to fold this up just a little bit to help me whenever I turn this. We will be turning this bag through this pocket. You can take this over to the iron if you want, or I've even used a glue stick on it before to kind of help, but I'm just rolling it just a little bit to kind of help. I'll sew down the sides, and then whenever I turn this bag right sides out through the end, at the end, it'll just kind of help to get a better finish, or at least I feel like it does. Now that I've got that clipped into place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back over so I can look at the right side. I'll pull that right side, the exterior back, as far as it'll go. I'm going to pull this side back as far as it'll go to expose my lining, my zipper pocket lining, and then I'm just going to start sewing. And really I want to sew as close as I can to the opening. Sew all the way down to the bottom, and for me that means sewing over those folded edges. Repeat those same steps on the other side, and then if you have anything that you need to trim, you can. I really don't have a lot to trim myself personally. We're going to set this back piece aside for a little bit. I'm not working on it right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back out this center piece. We're going to add the sides. Whenever you have the sides to this piece, it's easy to get a little confused. The way it helps me remember is this flat piece, this bigger flat side, that's going to go to your outside because that's where your webbing is going to attach, or your strap, your anchors. And so I know that this curve is going to match this curve. The point is going to be down, flat edge across the top, this piece on the outside. You should have cut your side pieces mirrored, so if you did do that, this should work out perfectly. Your other piece will have that flat edge on the side, point at the bottom, straight across the top. Then what you're going to do is you're just going to match these up. You can see that curve matches perfectly. So you're just going to match that curve on both sides, clip into place. And we're going to sew down both sides with the seam allowance given in the pattern, making sure you backstitch when you start and stop. You will be putting your needle down in this little flat place, so where the slope and that flat piece meet to make a peak, that's pretty much where your needle's going to sit. It's the proper seam allowance, but that's just another way you can know you have it right. So go ahead and backstitch there and come all the way down. I want to repeat that same line of stitching for the other side, but before I do that, I want to show you how this is going to work. We're going to flip this seam out. Go ahead and push it out, and you can see it's making that dimensional shape that will allow you to have more room to carry in this bag. But we also have to top stitch this. A little tricky. So when I'm top stitching it, I'm going to keep it pushed in. I'm going to kind of top stitch it like a bowl. On the exterior piece, we top stitch on the side piece. Our seam is going to be left on the side. We're not doing either seam. We're just laying this side piece on top of the seam and then stitching on the side piece to attach it to the seam. But we're going to do these same steps on the lining, except on the lining, we will top stitch it the other way. We'll have that seam going underneath this centerpiece, and then we'll top stitch on the centerpiece. That way, when we put this together, we will be able to nest those seams and kind of reduce some bulk inside this bag. So go ahead and separate it really good. Put your needle down 1/8 of an inch away from that seam you just sewed and start top stitching there. Don't worry about what the rest of it looks like. Just focus on one stitch at a time while you're top stitching and kind of keep a nice pull on the material so that nothing is getting bunched. And so when you flip it out, it'll look really nice. This is how your exterior looks. I'm going to repeat those same steps for the other side and the lining. And the lining, just remember, will be top stitched on the center, not on the side piece. I have the exterior front, the lining front completed. I pulled out the zipper tape, the main zipper tape for that main opening on this bag, and I marked the centers on all pieces. What we need to do now is we need to baste first the zipper to the exterior. So we do that by matching up the centers and then just clipping around and sewing this together along this top edge. This method is designed to have overhang on the ends. We will trim them up after we have the lining and the exterior sewn to the zipper, but we will leave it alone for right now and just sew from one edge all the way to the other. As always, when you're sewing with a curve, just pay attention to what's actually under your needle. Don't worry about the rest of it and just slowly adjust to make sure it's straight and everything's matching up whenever your foot is going over it so that it's sewn together correctly. After you have the exterior and the zipper basted together, go ahead and pull out your lining, match up that center, and clip those pieces together. This time you'll sew these pieces together with the full seam allowance from edge to edge, just like you did before. Once you have these pieces sewn together, let's go ahead and separate them and put them wrong sides together. At this point, what I'm going to do is I want to take the time to clip all around the bottom. We're going to baste the bottom and we're going to top stitch under the zipper edge. We're also going to lift up our flap and top stitch underneath it also. I'm going to take the time to match up these seams. You can see they're nesting perfectly because the pattern told us to top stitch them on the other sides. They fit in perfectly with each other. My exterior, my lining have a great feel. I feel like the structure is perfect. I don't want to change it at all. I love it. It feels really nice and firm. If you did not like the way yours was feeling, you could slip something in here if you wanted to, or iron something. You still have a choice now before you base it together, just if it's really bothering you. But with all the seams in here, if you follow the pattern instructions, you should be okay. I'm going to top stitch first, and I'm going to kind of be applying some pressure to keep those seams laying flat while I top stitch from one edge to the other. You can see I'm just lifting the flap up and top stitching underneath it so that I do not top stitch it closed. This is the way it should look on the front. Just beautiful. I love it so much, that shape. Here is the inside. You can see I do need to trim the zipper tabs. You can go ahead and do that now, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now it's time to add the top to this front piece. Like I'd said before, on my top piece, I wanted a little bit extra structure, but I didn't add the extra interfacing to the exterior. I added it to the lining. So for my exterior piece, all I have is this cotton canvas interface with the SF101. The pattern tells us to use the pattern piece to make 2 marks on the side. They are on your pattern piece. You just transfer them over. And then you also mark the center. I went ahead and marked the center here at the top. What we do now is we match this center with the center of the zipper. We also already know that the zipper is going to be too long for this top. So we are only going to sew from this spot all the way down here over to this other spot. That's what those 2 marks are for, to tell you when to start and stop sewing. First thing I do is I match up those centers, and then I just start clipping around. If you need to kind of pull it to you to curve it a little, you can do that as well. So this is how my first side looks. I'm going to start sewing here, and then I'll just ease the rest around without clipping. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I clip just a little bit before that piece so that I can get it under my needle without it shifting its shape. I'm going to fold it onto itself like this because that makes it easier where it's a curve, in my opinion, to sew it that way. I am just basting these 2 pieces together right now. Whenever I sew it with the lining, that's when I'll come in with that full seam allowance. Make sure you put your needle down exactly where that mark is and just sew in between those 2 spots. Here I am coming up to that other mark on the other side, so I'm going to just shift things around a little till I get right at that spot, and that is where I'll backstitch. So let's just poke this out so you can kind of see how it's looking. Everything's looking absolutely gorgeous. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back in. I'm going to check my seam. I felt like I was shifting. Yeah, I have a little shift there. I think that'll be okay. That's the only spot there, and that was just when I started. I should probably go ahead and fix that, even though it's just 1/8 of an inch. I just want it to look good. So I will fix this, and then I'm going to add the lining piece. So here is my exterior. I'll come in with that curved lining piece and add it on the other side. The exterior and the lining are going to be right sides together, and that zipper is going to be in between. So I'll clip around, and then I'll sew with the full seam allowance on one side all the way over to the other side. Now that we have these sewn right sides together, I just want to mention one thing. Whenever we're sewing the lining on, after we get to that mark we made, the pattern does tell us that we need to angle out till we come to the edge of the fabric, just to have that finished edge there. I forgot to mention that whenever I was saying that we would sew this the same way. So you can see my mark stops there, and then I angle out towards the edge. That just finishes that top piece. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this so that the top pieces are wrong sides together. Straighten everything out. And then we are going to top stitch all along this folded edge, the edge we just sewed. You want to kind of pull and make for sure you get a good top stitch. You can open your zipper if you need to. And then you're going to baste this straight edge all along here. You're going to baste that close. So you're going to push it in, and then you're going to start sewing at the one edge. I do my top stitching just 1/8 of an inch away. I take my time, hold everything tight, and just go one stitch at a time. So this is what we have. At this point, everything looks amazing, that shape. I'm so glad I had a little bit of extra support in here. I can tell that that's going to look really good in my pictures. It's going to wear really nice whenever I'm wearing it. It's not going to crumple up. So I do think having a little bit of extra will help here if you're using a woven material. I did a layer of fleece and a layer of Decaville Light, but I kept them well out of the seam allowances. They were not anywhere close in the seam allowance, and it was only on my lining piece, not on my exterior piece. We're getting close to being done, so we just got to finish up a couple things. We need to add the strap anchor, which is your shorter piece, and the actual strap, which is the longer piece. Now you can choose to make your strap out of regular cotton woven, vinyl, or use webbing, whatever you want to do. The pattern tells you how far down from each side you're going to place the webbing. It's the same measurement for each side, but what you do is you will leave an overhang. It tells you how much to leave, and then you will just baste it into place. The pattern tells us to put this strap anchor on the left and then the strap on the right. Not too big of a deal which one really, but we'll go ahead and do it exactly like this. I'm just going to baste this in place, and then I'll do the same thing for the strap on the other side. I'm not going to add any buckles or hardware or anything until after I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and roll the strap up so that it doesn't get in the way, and I will actually slip it down here in the pocket, and so it's just kind of tucked in there a little bit so that it's not going to get caught. There's not as big a chance of it getting caught in the sewing whenever I'm sewing everything together. Now go ahead and pull out the lining back piece and that exterior front and the lining inside. Have your lining right sides up, take your exterior and place it right sides up. The linings will be together. We're going to match the center marks up first here at the top and then clip all along this top edge. So you can see this exterior edge is going up and we need it to match here. So we're going to try to pull it down so that it makes a straight line and matches with that piece there on the lining. You'll clip it into place, but just know that when you're sewing it, you'll have to kind of tug it and pull it down so that it stays in line. It will line up, you just kind of have to pull it there. Let's continue clipping all on the other side, and then we're just going to baste this together all along this top edge only. I'm going to baste this from the lining side just because I can see it a little bit easier, but you can baste from whichever side you want to. After we have that top basted together, we're just going to do the same thing and clip all around the sides and the bottom and then baste that in place as well. You can probably see at this point what's going to happen. We're going to sew this piece together, then we're going to do the same thing with that back and sew all around it to have it kind of like right sides together with the exterior, and then turn it through the pocket. Here is how that piece looks. We'll start sewing up here at the top where we stopped sewing and go all the way around to the other side, just a basting stitch. I probably will do this one from the exterior just to watch it a little bit better on this one. So once you have that complete, go ahead and pull out that back piece. Like I said, I want to have that kind of, my webbing kind of slightly tucked in that zipper pocket. So I have my zipper pocket open. We're just going to place this entire thing right sides together. It's going to be a good little fit there. So go slow, don't get stressed out, and just start clipping all the way around. We're going to sew around this entire thing, so it's going to be kind of like a little fluffy pillow here. So here is how it looks. That is the lining. This is the back exterior with that pocket. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew all around here. I'm going to go slow. I'm going to do it off camera just so I can take my time and not waste everybody else's time. But we are going to do the full seam allowance all around here. After we get it sewn, the pattern designer tells us, Tara tells us that we can trim with pinking shears and clean up our edges a little bit. And then what we'll do is we will just turn it through this pocket and birth it that way. I'm going to go ahead and do all those steps off camera, so when I come back, I'll have everything done. I'll close up the pocket too, just to finish everything up. We know how to close up a pocket, I'm sure. But that is the next step, so we'll come back and we'll look at it and finish up our strap, and then our bag's done. My Richard waist bag is completely done, and I'm just in love with it as I was the first time I sewed it. This pattern's just such a cool pattern, so I love it. So let's just look around. Here is the front. We have that magnetic snap, a slip pocket, the main closure there, gorgeous flat top. This would be great for embroidery or a panel even too. Flip it over. It's getting caught here on my needle. Flip it over and you see the zipper pocket in the back. The way I did the strap was on the anchor side. I attached the male portion and I just folded it back and sewed it there. Then I added an adjustable bar and slipped on the female portion and then fed that free end of the webbing back through the adjustable bar. There's pictures in the pattern. It's not a very tricky spot to do. It's pretty simple. Let's look at the inside of this, just so you can see how wide it really is. That can easily fit several water bottles. This is a great waist bag. The size is perfect. A lot of waist bags are just really flat and you can barely even get your hand in there. You're not going to have problems carrying everything you need. You're not going to have problems finding everything. And it's still not that big. It's still a very small, slim fitting bag. It's going to fit perfectly as a waist bag or as a sling. I prefer to wear these as slings. It is my favorite type of bag to carry and wear, and this one's great. The front could be for your phone, it could be for gum, it could be for your wallet if you have a small wallet that you just want to be able to grab onto easily. That's a great place for just really quick access. Like I said, the inside's perfect for water bottles, if you have pets, your dog treats, whatever you need. Thanks so much for watching another one of my tutorials. This is the Richard waist bag from UhOh Creations. I'll definitely have the link for it in my description. My fabric for this outside, the bats, is from K&A Custom Fabrics. The contrast on the front and then the lining inside is from J&R Edwards. We'll have links for all of that. The webbing is from the Emporium. Have the information for that, as well as the zipper tape from Mormino. Thanks so much for watching another one of my tutorials, and today in your sewing room, I hope you're just able to reconnect with an older pattern that you've sewed once before, that you're able to take fabric and just turn it into something that's just a beautiful shape and something that you love and want to wear immediately. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.